Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, China says it is ready to cooperate with Russia to ease Middle East tensions. China beats the United States in global approval rating by the biggest margin ever. And we're going to explore how Ukraine is hoping to develop ties with the Middle East amid its war with Russia, as well as the Iran war. Congo says it is going to receive third country deportees from the US under a new deal. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. First up, China has expressed readiness to work with Russia to help ease tensions in the Middle East. In a phone call on Sunday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov agreed on the need for a ceasefire and a return to dialogue. Wang Yi said China and Russia, as permanent members of the UN Security Council, should promote fairness and take objective and balanced approach. Lavrov expressed deep concern over the escalating conflict, calling for immediate halt to military operations and a shift towards political and diplomatic solutions. So for more, joining us now on the line is Dr. Greg Barton, Professor of Global Islamic Politics with Peking University. So thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Greg Barton. What's the meaning of China and Russia joining hands to push for a ceasefire and a renewed diplomacy?
Well, I think the key issue is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, we know now takes 20% of oil and gas, but actually in some other areas like helium or urea is even more. And so the impact is global. And this is particularly the case in Asia. So most of the oil and gas and the byproducts going out of the Strait of Hormuz go to Asia, and Asia depends on the flows through the Strait of Hormuz for the majority of its supply. So this is a matter of global concern, and it now appears that America's got itself in a situation where it can't resolve this situation simply through bilateral negotiations with Iran. Iran doesn't trust America for understandable reasons. There's also the factor of Israel. The global community needs that strait open. Of course, the other Gulf states also need access to the Strait of Hormuz. And it looks at this stage as if the only solution will come through global cooperation. In this context, it needs to be explained, of course, that despite what Donald Trump may have thought at some point, there is no military solution to open the Strait of Hormuz. The solution has to be diplomatic, and it can't simply be bilateral, so it's going to have to involve cooperation from global powers. China certainly will play a role. Russia, as a global power, also has an interest.
So, in other words, based on what you have said, the U.S. and Israel have lit the fire, but to put out the fire, it requires much more powers.
That's right. Donald Trump said he didn't expect Iran to strike the Strait of Hormuz and close shipping, but of course This is what has been foretold in every wargaming scenario for decades. So his failure was not so much a failure of US intelligence, failure of intelligence on the part of the US president, in other words, not listening to the advice he was given. Israel shares a similar sort of blame for not recognizing what would happen when they started this conflict. Now they have no capacity by themselves to resolve the conflict. It certainly won't be a military resolution. It has to be diplomatic. But the trust is broken down, so it requires other parties to come and join.
So for powers that are not directly involved in the Iran war, what would a objective, balanced approach to the conflict look like?
Well, from the point of global needs and global powers, what we do realize is the Strait of Hormuz is critical to the global economy. We can't afford to live very long with that strait being closed or largely closed because of the importance of the oil and gas flows and the byproducts like helium, which is important for semiconductors, urea, important for fertilizers, etc. So everyone has a vested interest. From Iran's point of view, what Iran wants is really two things. Firstly, a guarantee that it won't suffer next year, the year after, sometime in the foreseeable future, another attack from Israel and America. So it wants to guarantee that it is safe from further escalation in years to come. Not just Israel and America attacking Iran, but also what Iran has called its axis of resistance. So Israeli actions in southern Lebanon, for example, the Houthis in Yemen largely work in tandem with Tehran. They also want guarantees that they will not be drawn into fresh conflict with their neighbor, Saudi Arabia. Shia militia and political parties in Iraq also want a guarantee of stability. The second thing that Iran wants beyond this stability for its country and its alliance partners is some sort of reparations. So at the moment, it's functioning as a sort of a toll keeper, a gatekeeper in the Strait of Hormuz. That's its leverage, its bargaining point. But what it would like is some support. Saudi Arabia may play a role in this, potentially China as well, in helping rebuild the damaged infrastructure. Of course, this is saying that we hope there's no further escalation of attacks on infrastructure. America's begun attacking bridges and universities and other vital infrastructure. The threat is attacks on power stations, even desalination plants. That would be too horrible to contemplate. But even the damage done, Iran will need help in rebuilding. Of course, one thing that America and Israel reasonably would like to see as an outcome is a guarantee that Iran won't pursue a nuclear weapons program. And there's some scope in the middle for meeting on those common needs. There are some points of agreement that can be worked out, but it won't occur with either America or Israel by themselves negotiating. They'll need international support.
The call between the two foreign ministers actually came ahead of a United Nations Security Council vote on a Bahraini draft resolution regarding the protection of commercial shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think the UN Security Council will vote to pass this resolution?
I think it's certainly in the interest of members of the council. I mean, the concept of free trade and free transit through international waters, particularly vital straits, and of course the Strait of Hormuz is one. The Bab el-Mandeb in the bottom of the Red Sea is another. Of course, historically we've had conflict over the Suez Canal, etc. These waterways are really important to the world functioning the way that we all need it to function, and so there's good sense in pursuing some resolution. The question is the steps that are taken to get to that point of resolution. But the agreement in principle is very clear.
And do you agree with this point from China's foreign minister that the fundamental way to resolve the navigation crisis at the Strait of Hormuz is to secure a ceasefire as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I think that's indisputable. There's only one way out of this, and it will be through negotiation towards a ceasefire, perhaps a temporary ceasefire to begin with, but becoming a permanent ceasefire. Iran wants guarantees that it won't suffer further invasions and attacks. That's very understandable. Iran doesn't have legal control of the Strait of Hormuz, but because of geography, it has the capacity to be a spoiler, and that's what it's been doing. No one wants to live with a situation where Iran acts as a kind of a gatekeeper collecting a toll, but that's its immediate leveraging bargaining point. So we need international community to come together. China is in a unique position to play leadership in this role to get a negotiated ceasefire, which becomes a permanent ceasefire.
Then, in a separate phone call between Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Iranian counterpart, the Russian side said that de-escalation would be easier if the United States abandoned this language of ultimatum and returned the whole situation to a negotiating track. Do you think the Russian diplomats have a point here?
I think on this particular issue, Lavrov certainly has a point. I mean, Russia has its own problems in global credibility, but it is on friendly terms. It's an ally with Iran, so it makes sense that it plays a role in this. And I think everyone agrees, both outside America, but also inside America, including inside Washington, D.C., that the language of the president is very unhelpful. This is not the way to find a solution. This bombast and vulgar language only makes it harder and only raises the risk of a military escalation, which is in no one's interest. So everyone is trying to de-escalate, cool the temperature, and then find a way of coming together on points of agreement. And that's possible. It's hard work.
Shifting gears a little bit, and let's turn to the situation in the battlefield. Professor, how would you comment on this fact that the Iranian forces have shot down 2 American military jets in recent days? Does this development mark a significant escalation of the war?
It marks a point of a wake-up call to reality. America has air superiority across Iran. There's no question that it can fly, particularly at higher altitudes, without being challenged. But air superiority in military terms is not the same as air supremacy. In other words, it can do a lot of things over Iranian airspace at this point, but it doesn't mean, despite what President Trump says, it doesn't mean that there are no radar systems, there are no ground-to-air missile systems capable of challenging American or other forces. We've just seen that proven. In one sense, it's remarkable that it's taken all these weeks until an American aircraft was shot down. But it is a reminder that Iran is built for resilience, it's built for asymmetrical warfare, and it's proven remarkably capable of adapting. I mean, it's not just a question of who controls the air above Iran, but it turns out that Iran's been able to take out many of the US radar systems that protect US forces in the Gulf, but also Gulf states. And so it's a reminder that despite the bombast of the American president, Iran is not completely taken out of the capacity to fight. It has considerable capacity to at least play a spoiling role, even if, of course, it's subject to humiliation in terms of American aircraft flying over its territory.
So, by the way, do you think this development will prompt President Donald Trump and his administration to decide to send the ground forces into the Iranian territory?
There's no good reason for President Trump to escalate to a ground forces, but that doesn't mean it won't happen because of reasons of emotion and pride. The reason I say there's no good reason is there's no plausible military plan to secure the opening of the Strait of Hormuz through ground forces. You know, even attempting to occupy the southern coast of Iran would prove to be extremely costly and unsustainable, whether it's taking islands or taking the actual coast. And to move further inland, I mean, Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq, twice the population, much larger than Afghanistan. We know what happened with American-led occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan. Despite overwhelming military power, it wasn't sufficient. Iran is on a different level of difficulty altogether. So best not to start a boots-on-the-ground escalation that will end badly for everyone involved. It could put the entire region at risk, particularly if we saw, a strike on Iran's one nuclear reactor, which is used for its electricity program, or strikes on other electricity infrastructure, which may directly or indirectly involve impacting on the desalination plants that the entire region needs to have drinking water. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong very quickly. And boots on the ground would be one of those things that would raise the risk of an escalation that no one can win.
Thank you very much for joining us and for your analysis. Greg Barton, Professor of Global Islamic Politics at Deakin University. Coming up, China beats the U.S. in global approval rating by the biggest margin ever. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Welcome. I am Chu Zhang, Deputy Director at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Fudan University. On the World Today program, we will dive beyond the headlines to uncover the stories, trends, and impacts that connect states across the globe. Join me on World Today.
You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China has surpassed the United States by its largest margin in 20 years in a new Gallup Global Approval Report. China's global approval rating rose to 36% in 2025, up from 32% a year earlier. U.S. approval dropped to 31% from the 39% in 2024. Previously, China had twice surpassed the United States in this particular rating during the George W. Bush administration as well as the first Donald Trump administration. So joining us now on the line is Dr. Wang Xingsong, Associate Professor with the School of Government, Beijing Normal University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So does the result of this opinion poll surprise you? Why or why not?
Well, I wouldn't say it's surprising because China's image has been relatively stable for years. What's changed last year was that China's approval rate stayed around low 30s, and last year it went up to 36%. So we did see a relative increase, but at the same time, we see a bigger and more striking change, which is the loss of the United States global image. While China's numbers improved, I think really the United States declined as much, if not more, than China's gaining. And it seems that the U.S. approval rate dropped by 10% or more in 44 countries. And especially interesting is that the U.S. is losing approval rate in places like Germany, the UK, and Canada. And all these are American allies. So this is more about a shift in how people are reacting to the United States leadership, because countries now are asking like which powers really look more predictable, more stable, and less disruptive. And I think in 2025, many seem to have found that Washington is less favorable.
Indeed, yeah, and it's important to note here that in particular, according to this poll, U.S. leadership's disapproval reached a record high of 48%. So there's a lot of reasons behind this. Now, actually, according to the poll, Professor Wang, we know China saw the strongest relative alignment from countries like Russia, Pakistan, Tunisia, and Singapore. How would you explain this?
Well, these countries are traditionally, having high approval rates with China. And if you take Russia as an example, Gallup shows that 69% of Russians approve of China's leadership, which is quite high. But of course, it's easy to understand because China and Russia are strategic partners, and especially given the current geopolitical tension that's going on around the world, I think both the Chinese and Russians are viewing each other in a more positive way, which is not surprising. In terms of Pakistan, China and Pakistan are Arab brothers, known as Arab brothers, and and China has invested quite heavily in Pakistan, particularly with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And Tunisia is a bit different because I think overall people over there are having a increasing disapproval of Western development models because they're facing quite some economic challenges and political uncertainties. And China appears to be a good alternative. And Singapore has long been China's largest FDI source, and China is increasing its foreign direct investment in Singapore as well. But Singapore is more pragmatic, and so we shouldn't take the number from Singapore as what it is, because Singaporeans are supporting not to take any side. And although the people in Singapore increasingly see China as a more favorable country.
Yeah, I guess Singaporeans are positioning themselves as a bridge or as a channel of communication between the U.S. and China. In the meantime, countries including Israel, Poland, the Philippines, and Albania favor the United States. Their net approval of the United States largely resembles their net disapproval of China. What is your thought?
Well, if you look at these countries, they share something in common, which is that all of them need America for, direct security protection, and they view America as an indispensable security partner. Take Poland as an example. It is on the NATO's eastern flank, and it views Russia as an immediate threat. So it needs America as a security protector. The Philippines apparently are having problems with China over South China Sea. So especially the Junior Marcos presidency is literally inviting Americans to be back in order to boost its own security. And Israel, it goes without saying, because Israel basically is ordering what's going on in Gaza and now what's going on in Iran. So there's no doubt they're going to view the Americans as more favorable. If you look at, I wouldn't be surprised the poll rate is going up this year as well. So all these countries are places where security ties are very central, and support for the U.S. remains very strong.
Now, talking more about Israel, it's interesting to note that actually traditionally or for decades, relationship between Israel and China went on in a pretty good manner until the outbreak of the Gaza crisis in 2023, following the killing in Israel by the Hamas. But looking to the future, to the foreseeable future, or over the long term, are you optimistic that relationship between Israel and China will warm up again?
Well, I think when it comes to global relations, it's all about interest and power, and historic traditions also matter. Historically, China and Israel, like you said, were in cordial relationship, and both sides enjoyed investments mutually. Especially China benefit from technological investments in China, and China also invested in Israel. But like you said, global politics shifted dramatically after 2023, October 7th incident. And we've seen what people would call genocide in Gaza by Israeli military. And now what's going on in Iran, which is basically invaded by two countries, America and Israel, for no reason. So that really puts the bilateral relations at a very hard position. But like I said, I think the situation is still going on, and China encourages all sides to calm down and discuss the issues through dialogues. China has always adopted this idea of resolving conflicts through dialogue. So China is very pragmatic. China is also principle-based power, which advocates for international order to be based on rules to be agreed upon by all powers. So I think as time goes on, China and Israel are going to further develop a more cordial relationship.
Actually, according to the poll, most countries don't have a strong preference for either the U.S. or China. Do you think this picture offers any guidance regarding how the U.S. and China should manage their bilateral ties in the days ahead? 1 minute.
Yeah, I think it's an important lesson for both U.S. and China that many countries in the world are trying to keep their options open, and neither country should take the poll as granted. For China, I think it shouldn't take the dissatisfaction with the U.S. automatically to be converting to genuine support for China. But for the U.S., obviously, it needs to correct its behavior in order to create a more stable international relations, as well as a better image in the world.
Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Wang Xingsong, Associate Professor with the School of Government with Beijing Normal University. More to come. We're going to explore how Ukraine, including its top leader, is hoping to develop ties with the Middle Eastern countries, a series of them, amid its war with Russia, as well as the war between the U.S. and Iran. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. We'll be back after a short break. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. China's transportation authorities estimate more than 840 million passenger trips during the three-day Qingming Festival holiday, up 6% from a year ago. Railway trips have increased by 8.2%, while road trips are up by 5.8%. This year's Qingming Festival has coincided with the spring break, boosting family trips. More than 62 million cars hit the road on the first day of the holiday, with new energy vehicles accounting for more than 22%. In the meantime, China's box office revenue during the holiday has so far surpassed the 227 million yuan, or some 33 million US dollars. So for more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Dr. Yao Shujie, Chang Kong Professor of Economics at Chongqing University.
Professor Yao, thank you very much for joining us. Millions of trips have been made during this year's Qingming holiday. So what does this tell us about China's consumption recovery and the mobility trends?
The Chinese economy has developing into a stage where there is a huge population of middle class who have been able to move away from the demand just for basic necessity into the so-called luxury services. Holiday, tourism, these kinds of things are considered to be luxurious demand for middle-class consumptions. And as China has such a huge population of middle class, I think the demand for these kinds of holiday travel and also tourism is getting increasingly popular. Particularly, China have a huge, territory. There's a lot of beautiful nature, scenery, cultural heritage, historical heritage, which are highly attractive to increase the leisure, increase the quality of people's life. And I think the domestic tourism, including some part of international tourism, has become a very popular, service area, meeting the increasing demand of this middle-class Chinese.
And what are some of the new travel, tourism, and consumption trends do you find?
The trend is getting more diversified. I mean, people are, in the past, they may take a tourist group to go in just a small place or a number of places with tourism group. And nowadays, I think there are more and more people, they want to have a deeper exploration of the tourist spot by driving their own cars and also travel huge distances with lots of flexibility. So I think the travel and tourism ecosystem have changed quite fundamentally from the earlier forms of tourism and travel. Nowadays, people are traveling in different means of transportation. For example, highway, motorway, railways, travel by sea, and also travel by airplane, and getting more and more like sort of short-term distance travel or medium-term travel by their own vehicles.
And with record high railway and highway traffic, as you mentioned, is China's transport infrastructure keeping pace with the demand?
Yes, the Chinese transportation, especially the modern transportation infrastructure, is now second to none. Since 2008, China started to build high-speed rail. The first high-speed rail is from Beijing to Tianjin, which signified the starting of China's basic transformation from the traditional system to a modern system, which is matching with the most advanced country. And by now, China have probably account for 70% of the global high-speed rail system, which transformed the Chinese transportation to a level that there's no country can be compared with what China can achieve today. So the building of the modern transportation system, let alone the high-speed rail, the motorway system is also second to none. And the aviation industry is also second to none. So China is now, I think, it's the most proudness of the economic development of China is the rapid development of the basic infrastructure to meet the increasing demand of the population. Not only the efficiency, the convenience, but also the cost is very low. And this is the most successful development achievement in the modern history.
And currently, the AI tools for trip planning are also seeing a surge. So how is the artificial intelligence changing the tourism ecosystem?
I just give you a personal example so that signify how improvement in the Chinese AI system integrated with the transportation system. Nowadays, suppose you plan for a trip, let's say from a place like Chongqing to Beijing or Harbin, about 10 days trip, and you go to the internet, like go to the WeChat. The WeChat will tell you what's the most convenient way and where to find the cheapest and most comfortable hotel and which kinds of trouble mean that you can save money and also cost. Basically, fingertips in the WeChat or there's any other mean, you get all the planning within a minute. And this would be unthinkable in the parts of China, which is unthinkable in many parts of the world. And I think this AI integration actually give a lot of convenience for the Chinese consumers and also save the time, save the money, give the the enjoyment and comfortability of the Chinese middle class. And I think China in this area have moved to the frontier of the global travel industry.
And we're also seeing the box office booming. So with the box office, tourism, and retail sales seeing surge, how critical is this integrated holiday economy in sustaining China's consumption growth?
The box office is another, surprise miracle to me. You know that when you have the popularity of TV, television, broadcasting in the system, at one point the Chinese people, they think they want to sit in the room in their house so that they can watch television with the film. And the film industry at some point actually suffered a great setback. But surprisingly, in recent years, particularly in the last decade, the film industry is coming back and it's getting bigger and bigger breakthrough. Why is that? It's not because of the television system is getting downward. It's because of the quality of the film industry have been increasing. There are lots of fairly high quality directors who are able to create films which can anchor into the heart of the Chinese consumers. In addition, the film industry have also increased the quality of services, the studios, the quality of studio, the sound, and also the picture quality, and also the advertising, the services accompany with that. So the people are attracting to the studio more and more, and they are paying more money willingly, which is highly affordable also, by the middle class. Especially parents, they are really, caring about their children. They want their children to know the history, to go the Chinese beautiful tradition of legacy. This is all coming up to push the box office up. Once people have more time and once they have more holiday, they will be able to enjoy these kinds of things.
And several provinces like Sichuan, Guizhou, and Jiangsu, they introduced spring breaks for the first time this year. So how significant is this policy for China's education and tourism systems? What's the benefit of it?
Yes, we have to see that the modern industrial production system has become more automatic. So more and more people are moving away from the traditional manufacturing sector because of the increase of technology. This leads a lot of labor input into agriculture, into manufacturing. So there are more labor moving out of the traditional industry into services. And it's also possible to enable workers on the factories to have more holidays because their productivity, especially labor productivity, have increasingly steadily. And this allow people to have more time for leisure without actually diminishing the production system. So as more technology improvement, there are less demand for labor in the factory floor, and there will be more demand for high-level services, and there will be more time for people to move out of production into consumption.
Yao Shujie, Changkong Professor of Economics with Chongqing University, speaking with my colleague Zhao Yang. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Ukraine and Syria have agreed to strengthen their security cooperation during President Zelensky's first visit to Damascus since the two sides restored diplomatic ties last year. The Ukrainian leader's Middle East tour focused on promoting Kiev's drone and air defense technologies. President Zelensky has also positioned Ukraine as a reliable grain supplier for the region. Before arriving in Syria, Zelensky signed long-term military cooperation deals with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So for more, my colleague Song Rui-Xin spoke with Dr. Zhang Xin, Deputy Director of the Center for Russian Studies, East China Normal University.
Professor Zhang, to begin with, this was the Ukrainian leader's first visit to Syria since diplomatic relations were restored in September 2024. What does this timing and choice of destination tell us about Ukraine's foreign policy priorities?
To me, it tells us primarily that Ukrainian state realized the interconnectedness between Europe, where Ukraine is located, and the broader Middle East. The interconnectedness between the two regions, particularly in the context of these two ongoing regional military conflicts or war, one in Ukraine with Russia, the other is now in multiple countries in Middle East. I think that the trip indicates that Ukrainian state, Ukrainian leaders realize very clearly how the two regions are interconnected, and then Ukraine to some extent wanted to show the readiness and the willingness to be more actively involved in the interconnectedness between the two regions, including security, regional transportation corridor, and the grain supply, these important sectors. I think Ukraine shows its willingness and readiness to be more active actor, and in many cases want to be a contributor to better use the situation, interconnected Europe, Middle East geopolitical situation for its own benefits.
Okay, so Ukraine is broadening its diplomatic outreach right now. Then Zelensky told Syria's leader that Ukraine is a reliable grain supplier and is ready to contribute to Middle Eastern food security. But Ukraine itself looks like it's still at war with its agricultural infrastructure under frequent attack. How credible is this pledge, and can Ukraine realistically guarantee stable grain exports to the region?
No, at this stage, Ukraine itself unilaterally cannot make such a guarantee, because its own domestic grain sector is on the one hand suffering from a military attack from Russia. On the other hand, it's also suffering from quite a severe shortage of fertilizer, mostly because the recent closure of the Hormuz Strait. So you can see that how Ukraine's, even its domestic grain market is affected simultaneously by these ongoing two regional wars. So in that sense, it cannot guarantee. But I think President Zelensky's promise shows at least both sides on surface are willing to broaden the Ukraine's potential role to be at least a part of a grain supplier to Syria and even to the broader Middle Eastern region. As long as those bottleneck I mentioned, attack from the Russian side, and also the shortage of fertilizer from the closure of Hormuz Strait can be partially resolved, then I think Ukraine is in the position to be at least a much more active supplier of grain to Syria as well as to the broader Middle Eastern regions.
So can we understand there's a clear gap between ambition and capability there? And if Ukraine may not yet have the capacity, what is the rationale behind this, like making such a promise now?
This is one of the main areas current Ukraine can make some promise, and those promises are not going to be 100% realized anytime soon. But it brings hope, brings potentials for all parties involved. And I don't think the Syrian government would take this promise on just literally. It's a gesture, not necessarily a solid promise of something that can be materialized 100% tomorrow.
Okay, then Ukraine and Syria have pledged to deepen security cooperation as well, says Zelensky. From Syria's perspective, what does engaging in military cooperation with Ukraine entail, and could Damascus face some domestic or international costs as a result?
On this, I think there's a bigger story, even more than Syria. I think Ukraine, after almost 5 years of warfare, in many cases are becoming a much stronger military state in certain sectors like drone production and also the personnel who are using drone for military purpose. They're actually a leading force, not only in Europe, on the international level. And also its experience of handling those negative consequences of area attack, including drones and missile attacks from abroad, mostly from Russia, of course, is also gaining significant progress. It's actually one of the most leading countries in terms of its experience handling aerial attack. So on those views, Ukraine seems to be interested and may have the real capacity to export its expertise, personnel, and the know-how, not only to Syria and to some other countries who are in need. Syria actually recently also received a missile attack from Iran or military forces under the support of Iran. So it may have some interest to gain a better access to those know-how, expertise, and information from Ukraine as a more experienced, much more experienced military state. So in that sense, I think Syria is interested in using these resources, expertise that Ukraine may be able to play. Yes, there will be eyebrows raised. There may be additional costs. We haven't seen any direct response from the Russian side yet. I don't think Moscow is very particularly happy with that. So there may be some particular costs to Syria because of its promised extended security tie with Ukraine. We will see what will come out of Moscow in the next few days.
So you are saying it is not just cooperation, it could also come with certain risks or trade-offs. Before Syria, Zelensky visited Turkey to discuss energy and security cooperation with President Erdogan. Zelensky said there were wide-ranging discussions with Syria's leader, as well as three-way talks that included Turkish foreign minister. How would you characterize the current dynamics among these three sides?
It's a very interesting format. The first time such a format was held, if my memory serves. And then you can see that Ukraine side is also actively not only to engage with Middle Eastern country on a bilateral basis, but also even try to forge some of these trilateral or even multilateral platform. And then it also shows the key sectors where Ukraine is concerned with that has a significant overlap with both Turkey and Syria, as I briefly already mentioned, right? National defense, military and defense sector in the context of two regional wars, and then the sectors and economic activity related to the grain market, including both production of grain and also regional transportation corridor related to exporting Ukrainian grains to the Middle East. Right? So those are the areas that all three countries are concerned, are direct stakeholder, you might say, a direct regional stakeholder. So I think the three-party platform started from those key issues and the key sectors of a common interest to develop dialogue and potentially to use these initial dialogue as the basis for further possible trilateral collaboration or even use that as a platform to broaden to the larger Middle Eastern regions. So Ukraine through some, maybe some other forces from Europe, Eastern Central Europe, together with all the Trans-Black Sea regions to build on the trilateral platform to bring in Middle Eastern countries. So I wouldn't surprise maybe in the near future there will be some trans-Black Sea platform that bring in Ukraine, Central Eastern European countries, and the Middle Eastern country, particularly Turkey and Syria. So I think that's an interesting and significant first step.
That was Dr. Zhang Xing from East China Normal University speaking with my colleague Song Ruixing. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Congo says it is going to receive some deportees from the United States as part of a new deal under the Trump administration's third country program. The migrants will start arriving in this country this month. The United States has struck such deportation deals with at least 7 other African nations. According to a recent report released by the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Trump administration has spent at least $40 million to deport about 300 migrants to countries other than their own origin. So joining us now on the line is Dr. He Wenping, Africa expert and a senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Congo, we understand, has described this particular arrangement as a temporary arrangement reflecting the country's commitment to human dignity and international solidarity. Underneath this official statement of the Congolese government, what do you see?
Well, this kind of commitment given by DRC, the Congo government, I think, of course, they want to save their own face and also give this response to the people, their own people, because people are questioning. So why our country will, accept those kind of illegal migrant people because they are not Congolese? So what kind of maybe deal has been reached between those government official or government, whatever, with the Donald Trump administration? So so there are different opinions, of course, come to them. So that's why even internationally and in Africa as a whole, they also need to show their this ownership building or dignity, whatever. So that is saying this is a temporary one. And even DRC government saying they will handle those cases one by one, according to DRC, their own constitution and relevant laws. So all those saying, of course, is to talking to others, to the people, and to international society as a whole.
Other African nations that have also accepted this third country deportation deal with Washington, they include Eswatini, South Sudan, and Guinea, etc. So are you optimistic that they can ensure the well-being of those deported migrants from the United States? And do you see any possibility that Washington might reward those countries in Africa with something for accepting this deportation deal?
Well, first, in terms of those fees, like a plane and all those logistic support, all those things, the White House will cover. Yes. On the American side, they're saying, you don't need to pay anything, those accepting country. By the way, what kind of other fee will be paid? Maybe to those receiving country, or those things hasn't been mentioned, on table, because they feel this is not good to make it transparent. But definitely there will be some maybe money reward goes to those countries, and also plus many more others. Like for sure, I think White House now link these things with like those investment in DRC, their like resources development, those mineral resources. So you see, our American company will come over to do investment here. So this is a bond deal, put them together. As in terms for those deportees, what is their future? Nobody care about those. You see, all those countries now agree to sign this kind of treaty with the United States. All goes to those poor, those least developing country. For example, the DRC, the Congo themselves. Wow, the per capita GDP only just $600. and more than 70% people themselves, Congolese, are living under poverty line. So how come they can offer like good residence for those deportees? No way. So I think those people being sent now to a country why you are not Congolese people, and then maybe you should find your jobs by yourself. Probably ended up also living in the jobless or like in the slum, whatever. So their future definitely will be miserable.
Now, in the meantime, we understand between South Africa, another nation in Africa, and the United States, there has been a diplomatic level dispute over President Trump's claim about the so-called white genocide in South Africa. And President Trump has actually openly welcomed white South African refugees to move to the United States. So, I mean, Dr. He, as you look at the situation and making comparison here, do you see the stark contrast here?
Yes, obviously, it is a very sharp, stark contract, and also shows very clear this double standard. You know, for those people, he think diplomatically, because this Donald Trump's policy towards South Africa is purely driven by his diplomacy, because in their eyes, South Africa, because now is against Israel's this bombing to Gaza, against this policy in a very strong way. Even lawsuits bring the Israel to the international court, named them as genocide to the Gaza people. So that is why Israel and the United States all not happy about South Africa. Even by the end of last year, the South Africa was hosting the G20 summit and also being boycotted by the White House. So that is why now Donald Trump saying, wow, you have been doing those bad policy. You treated white people not that good in South Africa. That's why he raising this flag very high, saying, we will welcome them, come to the United States, those white, those farmers. So you see, welcome someone and then deport many more those migrant people in the U.S. So this is a totally double standard and also very big contrast, all based on their own American first, this is so-called American first, because now make those illegal migrant people now out of U.S. This is becoming the number one concern now from the Donald Trump administration. I mean, in terms of his domestic policy. Yeah, we see a lot of things going on, even go to different U.S. city, also caused those tragedies.
Yeah, we know deporting the migrants you don't want to see in a particular jurisdiction to a third country is actually not a new practice, but I guess it's really questionable that this particular practice can end up solving the problem surrounding illegal migration. It's very complex issue. But thank you very much for joining us, Dr. He Wenping, African expert, and joining us from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. I'm Ding He in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.